The alien king thought his daughter was gone forever, until she returned with a human at her side. To most citizens, the stars were a comfort, proof that the Dominion still stood strong. But to King Valor, they were a reminder of loss. He stood alone on the high balcony of the celestial palace, his tall figure wrapped in a dark royal cloak. His crown rested heavy on his head, though not because of its weight. It was heavy because of memory. 7 cycles had passed since his daughter vanished. Princess Calith, the light of Aurelia, the future of the throne, gone. The night she disappeared was burned into his mind. Her diplomatic ship had entered a distant region near the edge of known space. It was meant to be a simple mission, meet a minor trade coalition, return within days. But the ship never came back. No wreckage, no signal, only silence. At first, Valor had believed she was alive. He had sent fleets, scouts, long-range probes. He had opened ancient star maps and forbidden routes. He had even offered rewards to mercenary clans and wandering explorers. Nothing. Slowly, hope became grief, and grief became something heavier, regret. Behind him, the doors to the balcony opened with a soft sound. High Chancellor Morek stepped forward, careful and respectful. "Your Majesty," Morek said gently, "the council awaits you." Valor did not turn. "They can wait," the king replied. His voice was calm but tired. "The stars are speaking tonight." Morex hesitated. 7 cycles, Your Majesty. The council worries the people see your silence as weakness." Valor finally turned, his glowing silver eyes sharp despite the sorrow behind them. "Let them worry," he said. "A king who forgets his child is no king at all." Morex bowed his head and stepped back. Valor returned his gaze to the sky. Calith loved the stars. As a child, she would sneak out of her chambers and sit beside him right where he stood now. She would ask endless questions. Why some stars burned red, why others died, why the universe was so large if life was so fragile. She had never been afraid of the unknown. That was why he had let her go. Far beyond the Aurelian capital, in distant sectors of space, the galaxy was changing. New powers were rising. Old alliances were cracking. The Aurelian dominion was ancient and respected, but even ancient empires could weaken. Rival factions whispered that King Valor had lost his edge. That grief had dulled his judgment. Some even said the throne would fall when he did. None of them dared say it aloud. Yet, in the outer halls of the palace, the Grand Council gathered. Generals, scholars, diplomats, and trade lords stood beneath massive glowing pillars carved with the history of the Dominion. Supreme Admiral Corthan spoke first. "Our border fleets report increased movement from the Vierks coalition," he said. "They are testing our defenses." "They sense weakness," added Lady Severin, head of foreign intelligence. "They believe the loss of the princess has broken us." Murmurs filled the chamber. King Valor entered, his presence silencing them instantly. "We are not broken," he said firmly. "We endure." "Endurance alone may not be enough," Admiral Corthan replied carefully, "especially with new factors emerging." Valor raised an eyebrow. "New factors?" Lady Severin activated a holographic display. Strange star systems appeared, marked in unfamiliar symbols. "A young species," she said. "They call themselves humans." The word echoed softly through the chamber. "Humans," one counselor scoffed. "Barely spacefaring, short-lived, no galactic influence." "So we thought," Severin replied, "but they are spreading quickly. Surviving environments that should destroy them, adapting faster than predicted." Valor listened but said nothing. "They don't dominate," Severin continued. "They endure, they repair, they learn. Their ships are simple but effective." "Persistence is not power," another counselor argued. "No," Valor said at last, "but it often leads to it." The council fell silent. Still, the topic moved on: trade routes, defense lines, political tension, but none of it stirred the king's heart. Because none of it was Calith. Far away beyond the mapped borders of the Dominion, a small human vessel drifted through damaged space lanes. Its hull showed scars of travel, burn marks, repaired plates, mismatched components. It was not beautiful. It was alive. Inside the ship, Princess Calith stood at the viewing port. Her once pristine royal armor was replaced with simple travel gear. Her posture was still noble, but there was something new in her stance. Strength earned, not inherited. Behind her, a human voice spoke. "We'll reach relay range soon." Commander Elias Trent adjusted the ship's controls with steady hands. He was human, clearly so. No enhancements, no glowing markings, just determination in his eyes. Calith turned toward him. "Once the signal is sent," she said, "there will be no turning back." Elias nodded. I figured that part. You may be judged, she warned. My people are cautious, proud. Elias gave a small smile. So are mine. Kalith studied him quietly. When her ship had been destroyed years ago, she had expected death. Instead, she had been pulled from the wreckage by humans, exhausted, under-equipped, and completely unwilling to leave anyone behind. They had shared food, shelter, and risk without asking who she was. To them, survival was a shared task that had changed her. The ship's console chimed. Signal ready, Elias said. Kalith took a deep breath and placed her hand on the console. Her royal code, unchanged, forgotten by most, activated instantly. Aurelian relay stations, long silent, began to awaken. Across the galaxy, alarms sounded. In the Celestial Palace, an ancient terminal lit up for the first time in 7 cycles. A single message appeared. Royal bloodline confirmed. Princess Kalith, alive. King Valor felt the universe stop. He stared at the message, unable to breathe. Alive. His daughter was alive. Tears, something he had not allowed himself in years, filled his eyes. Where? He whispered. The terminal updated. Inbound, not alone. Valor straightened slowly. Not alone. In the darkness of space, the human ship changed course toward the heart of the Dominion. Neither the king nor the galaxy yet understood what that meant. But everything was about to change. News of Princess Kalith's survival traveled faster than any starship. Word spread from the Celestial Palace to every district, every spaceport, every station orbiting the great capital. Citizens whispered, merchants shouted, scholars debated. The princess, alive after 7 cycles? Impossible. King Valor did not leave his chambers for hours. He remained on the balcony, staring at the sky, listening to the hum of the palace below. For the first time in years, he felt hope pulse through him, not the cautious hope of a ruler, but the raw hope of a father. Then the message arrived. It was simple. No words, no ceremony, only coordinates. Kalith had sent her location, and she was close. The king's heart pounded. Prepare the royal fleet, Valor ordered, his voice firm. We meet her at the edge of our space. Supreme Admiral Corthan bowed, a mixture of awe and concern on his face. Your Majesty, you will be reunited with your daughter, but we do not know what waits beyond the borders. Unknown systems are perilous. Pirates, rogue factions, even wild phenomena. Valor turned to him, eyes glowing silver in the dim light. I do not fear danger. I fear only that I may arrive too late. Thousands of kilometers away, in the dark emptiness of space between star systems, Princess Kalith's vessel approached the boundary of Aurelian space. The human ship moved slowly but steadily, navigating debris fields and gravitational anomalies that could destroy less careful pilots. Elias Trent stood at the helm, hands steady on the controls. He had learned patience and precision through years of surviving where others would fail. Humans were not the fastest, the strongest, or the most technologically advanced, but they endured. Kalith had seen that every day since her rescue. You think they'll accept me? Kalith asked quietly. Her gaze remained fixed on the stars outside. They don't have a choice, Elias replied with a calm grin. You're alive, that's enough. She smiled faintly but did not relax. Years of isolation had changed her. She had grown sharper, faster in thought, and more cautious in action. And she knew her people. The Aurelian Dominion respected strength, but they feared change. A human at her side would test that fear. The ship's communication array buzzed. A warning blinked, Aurelian defense fleet approaching. Ready yourself, Kalith said. They will not know who is in that ship yet, and when they do, they may attack first. Elias nodded, adjusting the trajectory. We'll make it obvious it's her, Princess Kalith, but subtle. Humans are good at the unexpected. In the Celestial Palace, the council waited with tense anticipation. Every eye was on King Valor. The princess is alive, he said, his voice ringing in the council chamber. And she returns to us with someone else. Someone else? Lady Severin asked, narrowing her eyes. Yes, Valor replied. A human. I have not yet seen him, but we will. A hush fell over the room. Humans were rare in Aurelian space. They had barely begun to explore the outer systems. They were primitive, fragile, and short-lived, yet somehow this one had survived where Aurelian ships had failed. Supreme Admiral Corthan frowned. Do we know his intentions? The princess chose him, Valor said, his tone final. That is enough for me. Still, the council remained uneasy. Kalith had always been brilliant, but returning with a human-challenged tradition, pride, and politics in equal measure. Back in space, Kalith's vessel approached the first relay station marking the boundary of the Dominion. Its ancient mechanisms, dormant for decades, stirred as her signal activated. Lights flickered across the station, and slowly the dormant communications network hummed back to life. Inside the palace, technicians and signal operators scrambled to decode the incoming message. Data flowed across screens in waves. Finally, a single alert appeared, Princess Kalith, arriving with human. Gasps filled the command room. The king exhaled slowly. Prepare the fleet, but remember this is her return, not a battle. Treat it with respect. Admiral Corthan bowed. Yes, your majesty, but the unknown, it may test our patience and discipline. Kalith's ship emerged from the nebula at the edge of Aurelian space. At first glance, it seemed small, almost fragile. Its hull bore marks of travel, battle, and repair, scars from survival. Aurelian patrol ships closed in, scanning. Their sensors recorded no weapon signatures, no cloaking devices, no false transponders. Only Kalith's ship and the human beside her. Open hailing frequency, Kalith ordered. The transmission crackled, then a familiar voice rang through the channel. Princess Kalith? Yes, she replied, steady and commanding. I am alive, prepare to receive me. The patrol ships hesitated. Protocol required identification and inspection. But her voice, her tone, it left no doubt. The light of Aurelia had returned. One of the lead captains spoke, voice trembling with awe. Her Majesty, but with human. Yes, Kalith said firmly. He is my companion. He has guided and protected me. He comes as my ally. The lead captain hesitated, then relayed the message up the chain. Soon, the fleet formed a corridor, escorting Kalith and her human companions safely toward the capital. King Valor watched the live feed from the palace balcony, his breath caught. The ship glimmered as it passed through the atmosphere of the capital. There she was, his daughter, alive, strong, changed. Beside her, Elias Trent moved with quiet confidence. No weapons displayed, no arrogance, just calm, steady determination. A human who survived and in doing so proved the essence of humanity, endurance, ingenuity, and courage. The king's heart raced. He wanted to run to her, to embrace her, to ask every question that had haunted him for 7 cycles. But he remained silent, regal, waiting. Kalith's ship landed smoothly in the royal docking bay. The human vessel, though small and simple compared to Aurelian ships, touched the platform as carefully as a falling feather. The docking clamps clicked, the ship powered down, and a hush fell over the spectators. The doors of the vessel opened. Kalith stepped out first. Her armor, though simple and worn, gleamed faintly under the artificial light. Her posture radiated command and confidence. Behind her, Elias Trent stepped down with equal poise. He looked around at the assembly of Aurelian nobles, soldiers, and officials, calm, steady, and unflinching. King Valor descended the steps. His cape brushed against the polished floor, his eyes fixed on the daughter he had mourned for so long. Kalith, he said softly. The princess turned, her eyes met his, silver eyes like his but sharpened with experience and courage. Father, she said, bowing slightly but holding her head high. Valor's voice broke. You are alive. Yes, father, and I am not alone, she said, gesturing to Elias. He kept me safe. He is my companion. The king studied the human carefully. Humans were smaller than most Aurelians, less armored, less durable, but this one did not appear weak. There was a spark in his eyes that spoke of intelligence, endurance, and courage. Valor said nothing. Instead, he reached out, taking his daughter's hand. It was small, worn from travel, but strong. He felt the life within her, the spirit he feared lost forever. The council watched in silence. Some were skeptical, some were impressed, a few were fearful. A human at the princess's side challenged centuries of tradition. But none could deny the truth. Princess Kalith had returned. That night in the private halls of the celestial palace, father and daughter spoke alone. How did you survive? Valor asked, voice low, almost reverent. Kalith recounted the events, the loss of her ship, the human rescue, the years of travel through dangerous space, and the trust she had placed in Elias. The king listened, absorbing every word. He realized that survival had not been easy, that Kalith had grown not just in age, but in wisdom, courage, and resilience. You are no longer the child I sent away, Valor said quietly. You are someone new, stronger than I imagined. Kalith smiled faintly. And I am not afraid, father. Not of the stars, not of your people, not of the challenges ahead. Humans endure, and I have learned from them. We can face anything together. Valor studied Elias again. The human's calm confidence and quiet strength impressed him more than any display of Aurelian power. Perhaps there was wisdom in the princess's choice. The stars outside the window seemed brighter than ever. For the first time in 7 cycles, King Valor felt hope not as a ruler but as a father. The galaxy awaited. And soon it would witness not only the return of a lost princess, but the beginning of a new alliance, one that even the most powerful empires could not ignore. The sun rose slowly over the Aurelian capital, casting long beams of gold across the polished marble floors of the celestial palace. For King Valor, the morning brought no rest. Even though his daughter had returned and the human companion had proven calm and capable, he could not ignore the questions that lingered in the minds of the council, and in his own. How did she survive? He asked himself again. And what does it mean for the Dominion that a human stood beside her? The council gathered once more in the high chamber, their faces tense, their postures rigid. Some were proud that Princess Calith had returned. Others feared what her alliance with a human might signify. Supreme Admiral Corthan spoke first, his tone measured. Your Majesty, the princess's return is miraculous, but the human, he is untested. We do not know his abilities or loyalty. Protocol demands we examine him carefully. Protocol? Valor's voice was firm. He walked through fire to bring my daughter home. Does that not prove his loyalty? Lady Severin, head of intelligence, shook her head. Strength of will is not always enough. He comes from a species we understand very little. Their customs, their decision-making, they differ greatly from ours. Valor did not answer. He only looked toward the balcony windows where the distant stars shimmered. He remembered how Calith had always faced challenges with courage, and now she had chosen to trust a human. Perhaps that was proof enough. Meanwhile, in the private training halls of the palace, Calith was preparing for her first demonstration of her return. She trained daily, honing skills that had once been perfect in her youth, but were now stronger, sharper, refined by years of survival. Elias watched quietly, standing at her side. He had learned the basics of Aurelian combat and strategy, though his strength was not in raw power. He was human, smaller and less armored, but his mind was quick. He noticed patterns, predicted movements, and found solutions where brute force failed. Father should see this, Calith said, breaking the silence. He will not fully understand until he sees what we can do. Elias nodded. Then let him see it. They moved together in the training hall. Calith's agility impressed all observers, her strikes precise and powerful. Elias, though smaller and slower, moved in ways no one expected. He anticipated attacks, dodged without effort, and used opponents' movements against them. Where Aurelian soldiers relied on raw strength, he relied on ingenuity. It was a new kind of strength, one that did not rely on centuries of tradition. The demonstration did not go unnoticed. Word of the humans' capabilities spread through the palace and beyond. Some nobles were intrigued, curious about this species that could survive and think so differently. Others were suspicious. They whispered of rebellion, of disruption, of a species that might not obey the Dominion's laws or traditions. Valor watched all of this silently, observing how Calith and Elias handled the scrutiny. Neither faltered, neither bowed to fear or judgment. Both stood strong not only in skill but in resolve. That evening, Valor summoned them to his private chambers. The air was heavy with anticipation. You have returned with a human, he said, and yet he is unlike any human I have seen. He stands with confidence, with discipline, and with courage. How did you survive together? Calith recounted the events again, more in detail this time. She spoke of her ship's destruction, the endless days drifting in space, and how humans saved her, not just once, but repeatedly. They had shared food, repaired systems, navigated treacherous regions, and faced dangers that Aurelians would never dare confront. Elias added modestly, we did what we had to do. No one left behind, simple rules, adapt, endure, survive. Valor's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Humans, he realized, were not powerful in the traditional sense, but they were resilient. They could survive against impossible odds. They adapted quickly, learned faster than most species he had known, and were willing to endure hardships that would break even a seasoned Aurelian warrior. Your species survives where others fail, Valor said slowly, almost to himself. Perhaps that is a kind of strength we have forgotten. Calith looked at him, her eyes bright. Humans survive not because they dominate, but because they endure. They think, they adapt, and they never give up. I learned that firsthand. The king nodded, understanding more than he could explain. He realized that the galaxy was changing, and Calith's alliance with a human might be the beginning of something new, something powerful. Days passed. Elias learned more about the Aurelian world, their customs, and their expectations. He observed the military drills, studied their strategies, and attended council meetings. Though initially met with skepticism, he began demonstrating ways to improve efficiency and response. One evening, a minor crisis arose. A group of rogue traders had entered Aurelian space without authorization. Traditional protocols called for overwhelming force and immediate capture, but Elias suggested a different approach: subtlety, negotiation, and tactical misdirection. At first, the council was reluctant, but Calith supported him. "We can try," she said. "Sometimes thinking differently is stronger than attacking blindly." The plan worked. The traders were captured without bloodshed, and the Dominion avoided unnecessary conflict. News of this success spread quickly, and murmurs began in the court. Perhaps humans were not as weak as some had thought. Valor watched from his chambers. He realized that Elias was not just a companion to Calith. He was a teacher, a guide, and an example of resilience. He embodied everything the king had long admired but rarely seen: endurance, courage, and ingenuity in the face of adversity. But not all were convinced. Some nobles and council members began plotting. They feared change, feared what a human presence might mean for the future of the Dominion. One evening in the shadowed corridors of the palace, a small group of dissenters met quietly. "We cannot allow this human to influence the princess," one whispered. "He is an outsider." "Weak, yes, but dangerous. His ideas will change everything." "Perhaps," another said. "But the princess trusts him, the king trusts him. We must find a way to prove his inadequacy or risk losing control entirely." They planned quietly, unaware that Elias had already noticed unusual movements in palace activity. He observed patterns, anticipated actions, and prepared responses, not with violence but with awareness. Humans survived by thinking ahead, by noticing details that others overlooked. Calith noticed too. She understood that the court was cautious, sometimes hostile, but she did not fear it. She had endured far greater dangers in the void. One night, Calith and Elias stood together on the palace balcony, looking out at the stars. "Do you think they will accept us?" Calith asked softly. Elias smiled faintly. "They will have to. You survived, and I am here. That's proof enough." She leaned slightly against him, comforted by his presence. "I never imagined returning like this, not just alive, but with a human beside me. Will they see the truth?" "Eventually," Elias said. "They may resist at first, but humans adapt. We endure. We prove ourselves through action, not words." Calith nodded. She realized he was right. Her return was not only about surviving, it was about showing the galaxy that strength came in many forms, not just through power or heritage. The next morning, a new message arrived. A distant system had reported strange readings. An unknown entity had been detected near the outer borders. No one could identify it. It moved unpredictably, destroyed or avoided ships with ease, and left no clear trail. Calith and Elias studied the reports. "This is the first real test," Calith said. "Not just for us, but for the Dominion." Valor called an emergency meeting of the council. "An unknown threat approaches," he said. "We will need all our fleets and all our minds to respond. Calith, Elias, your input will be vital." The council murmured, some openly skeptical, but the king's decision was final. If Calith and the human had survived together, perhaps they could provide insights that traditional Aurelian strategy could not. Elias nodded quietly. "Then let us prepare. They will see that survival is not weakness, and that humans can endure anything, even the unknown." Calith placed a hand on his shoulder. "Together," she said, "we face it together." The stars stretched endlessly before them. The galaxy waited. And for the first time, the Aurelian Dominion understood that strength could come not only from blood or power, but from resilience, courage, and the will to survive. Sensors flickered with strange energy readings, and no matter how many scans were sent, the entity remained mysterious. It moved unpredictably, appearing in one sector and disappearing from another. Entire patrols had been destroyed, their ships reduced to floating debris before the fleet could react. Panic quietly spread among some officers, though they did not show it openly. King Valor stood in the command center, flanked by Calith and Elias. The weight of the unknown pressed upon them, heavier than any war the Dominion had faced before. "This entity," Valor said, his voice calm but tense, is unlike anything in our records. It does not follow conventional tactics, does not respond to communication, and avoids our strongest weapons. Kalith leaned forward, her silver eyes sharp. It has intelligence, she said. It observes, it adapts, but it is not infallible. Every creature, every machine, every being has weaknesses, Elias added, and humans excel at finding them. We do not always overpower threats, we outthink them. Vaylor's gaze shifted to him, studying the human carefully. Explain. Elias pointed to a tactical display showing the recent encounters. Notice the pattern. It strikes only when it perceives overconfidence or predictable movement. It avoids areas where ships move unpredictably or where small diversions exist. It learns from mistakes, quickly. It is fast, yes, but not all-powerful. Its mind has limits. The king nodded slowly. So our strength lies not in matching it directly, but in being unpredictable, adaptation over force. Kalith smiled faintly. Exactly, and that is why I brought him. The fleet prepared for engagement. Kalith and Elias proposed a plan different from the traditional Aurelian tactics. Normally, the Dominion relied on overwhelming firepower, shield formations, and brute force. But these methods had failed against this entity. Instead, Elias suggested using smaller, agile ships as decoys. They would draw the entity's attention while larger vessels waited in a concealed formation. Every movement would be designed to appear predictable while actually hiding the real attack. The council was skeptical. Admiral Corthan frowned. You propose we risk smaller ships as bait. That is dangerous and unorthodox. Kalith placed a hand on the human's shoulder. It is necessary. The entity is intelligent. Conventional tactics will fail. Trust us. Vaylor studied them both. After a moment of silence, he said, Do it. Every life is precious, but this is the only way. The next day, the fleet moved into position. The unknown entity appeared as expected, drawn to the smaller ships that darted like sparks across the void. Its energy pulses destroyed a few, but the remaining vessels maneuvered cleverly, retreating at precise moments. Elias guided the fleet's movements, his calculations and instinct sharp. He observed the entity's reactions and predicted its patterns. Aurelian captains, initially skeptical, began to follow his lead. For the first time, the human style of combat, the unpredictable adaptive strategy, worked alongside the Dominion's might. Kalith directed the fleet with precision, her voice steady in the command channel. Keep formation. Do not let fear dictate your actions. Watch its responses. Use them against it. The entity, confused by the combination of Aurelian discipline and human unpredictability, made mistakes. Its attacks became less coordinated, and small openings appeared in its defense. Elias spotted a critical vulnerability. It overcompensates when it thinks it has trapped a target. If we bait it again, we can lead it into a containment field. It will be trapped, not destroyed, but contained. Kalith's eyes sparkled with determination. Do it! All ships follow the plan exactly. The battle unfolded with precision. Smaller ships darted forward and retreated as if mocking the entity. Energy pulses and weapon fire followed the pattern Elias predicted. The entity lunged and struck repeatedly, but never fully anticipated the fleet's movements. Finally, it entered the containment field, a massive energy trap designed to immobilize it. Lights flashed across the fleet's control panels as the field activated, wrapping around the entity in a cocoon of energy. For the first time, the unknown force was held still. A cheer rose from the fleet. For centuries, the Aurelian Dominion had prided itself on military might, but never before had they faced a threat so intelligent and adaptive. Yet, under the guidance of Kalith and the human, they had succeeded. King Vaylor allowed himself a rare smile. They survived, he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. My daughter and this human, they survived where others would have failed. The council convened afterward to discuss what had happened. Some nobles were still uneasy. Humans were fragile by nature, and their reliance on cunning rather than power made them unpredictable allies. Others were in awe, recognizing that the human companion had been instrumental in saving the fleet. Lady Severin spoke cautiously. It is clear the human provided insights beyond our understanding. Perhaps humans are not as weak as we believed. Admiral Corthan nodded. Their adaptability saved lives, I cannot deny it, but they are different. They cannot be controlled in the same way we control Aurelian officers. Vaylor listened to their concerns but felt a growing understanding. Strength was not always about raw power. Sometimes it was about endurance, cleverness, and the will to survive. Elias embodied that philosophy. Caliph added quietly, "Humans do not fight like us because they do not see the same rules. That is why we survived. That is why I returned with him." The king's gaze softened. "Then perhaps it is time to learn from them, not dismiss them." In the days following the battle, Caliph and Elias worked with the fleet to improve defenses and strategies. They trained crews to think differently, to anticipate threats, to adapt on the fly rather than rely solely on orders. Elias often spoke to Aurelian cadets, teaching them lessons he had learned in the void. "Survival is not about being the strongest," he said. "It is about noticing what others miss, learning from every mistake, and never giving up. You can endure more than you think." Some officers resisted at first, uncomfortable with ideas that challenged tradition. But as drills and exercises demonstrated success, they began to respect him. By the end of the week, whispers changed from doubt to admiration. Caliph observed silently, proud of both her companion and her people. She realized that the galaxy had changed, and the Aurelian Dominion could change too if it embraced new ways of thinking. But not all threats came from space. Within the palace, dissenters who opposed Caliph's alliance with a human grew restless. In shadowed halls, they whispered, "The princess trusts him too much. He is not one of us. How can he influence her?" Another said, "He saved the fleet, but only because he is clever. What if his ideas challenge our power, our traditions?" Yet their plotting went unnoticed by those they sought to deceive. Humans noticed details others ignored. Elias observed unusual movements, studied minor irregularities, and predicted attempts to sabotage or undermine them. In the void, survival had taught him to pay attention to small things, details that often made the difference between life and death. Caliph noticed too. She trusted him not only because of what he could do, but because of what he saw, the things others missed. Together, they were a team that could anticipate threats, both from the stars and within the palace. Late one night, Valor stood on the balcony again, looking at the stars. The galaxy seemed quiet, yet he knew the calm would not last. Caliph and Elias joined him. He studied both of them, his daughter grown stronger than he had imagined, and the human quiet but unshakable. "You have changed everything," he said softly. "Not only have you returned, but you have shown us that strength is more than power, and survival is more than endurance." "It is wisdom," Caliph smiled. "The galaxy is full of surprises, Father, and humans, we do not stop at what seems impossible. We endure, we survive, and sometimes that is enough to change everything." Elias added quietly, "Sometimes the strongest force is not the one you can see. It is the one you cannot predict, and that is why we survived and why we will survive again." Valor nodded slowly. He realized that the Dominion, for all its traditions, could not ignore what humans represented. Their resilience, adaptability, and courage were forces the galaxy had never truly measured. As the stars stretched endlessly before them, Valor felt a quiet hope. Caliph had returned, the human had proven himself, and together they had faced the unknown and emerged victorious. But the galaxy was vast, and dangers waited beyond the edge of known space. New challenges would come. And when they did, humans, and Aurelians willing to learn from them, would show that survival, ingenuity, and courage could triumph where strength alone might fail. For the first time in many cycles, King Valor knew the Dominion was ready, not just to endure, but to thrive. Ships that had faced the unknown entity returned to the capital, some damaged, some barely holding together. Their crews were weary but alive, and for the first time in cycles, the citizens celebrated not only the survival of their fleet, but the return of Princess Caliph and her human companion, Elias Trent. King Valor stood atop the balcony of the Celestial Palace, observing the activity in the docks below. Ships moved carefully among the platforms, repairs in progress, crews bustling with renewed energy. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel pride, not as a ruler, but as a father. Caliph and Elias approached quietly. The princess now walked with confidence that radiated authority, tempered by the lessons of survival. She had seen danger, loss, and adversity and had endured them all. Elias, as steady and calm as ever, followed her with quiet dignity. Valor turned to them. "The galaxy will speak of this day for cycles to come," he said. "Not because of our strength alone, but because you survived, together." Caliph smiled softly. "Father, it is not survival alone that matters, it is how we use it. Humanity survives because we endure, we adapt, and we learn, and now we have a chance to shape the future. Elias nodded. We faced something the Dominion could not predict, and we won, not because of power, but because of thinking differently. If the galaxy continues to test us, it is our mind and our will that will see us through. Vaylor studied both of them. He understood now that the human was more than a companion. He was a partner, a teacher, and an example of resilience. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, just as many had underestimated Calith. Together, they represented a force that could not be ignored. The council convened later that day. Though many nobles remained uneasy about the humans' presence, there was no denying the facts. Calith had returned, alive and stronger than ever. Elias had contributed directly to the fleet's success against the unknown entity. The Dominion had survived a threat that many believed impossible. Supreme Admiral Corthan spoke first. Your Majesty, the fleet owes its survival to the strategies introduced by the princess and her companion. Traditional tactics would have failed. Lady Severin, head of intelligence, added carefully, and the human demonstrated abilities we did not expect. His adaptability, perception, and problem-solving skills were crucial. It cannot be ignored. A murmur spread through the council. Some whispered in doubt, others in awe. Humans were fragile, but they endured, and in doing so, they changed the rules of the game. Vaylor rose, his voice commanding attention. The galaxy is changing. New species, new ideas, and new ways of thinking will shape the future. Calith and her human companion have shown us the strength in endurance, adaptability, and courage. They have proven that survival is not weakness, it is power. A hush fell over the council. Some were skeptical, some inspired, but all understood the truth. Calith and Elias had altered the future of the Dominion. Outside the council chambers, Calith and Elias walked through the palace gardens. The sunlight reflected off the fountains, casting glittering patterns across the marble pathways. For Calith, the gardens had always been a place of reflection and peace. Now they were a place of possibility. We did it, Calith said quietly. Elias smiled faintly. Not just us, the fleet adapted, your people adapted, that is what makes this victory real. Calith looked at him. They will need time, some may resist, some may resent, but they will see the value in what we have learned and in you. I do not seek acceptance, Elias said calmly. I seek survival and understanding. The rest follows naturally, she nodded. And together we will guide them, not with fear, not with domination, but with wisdom. Weeks passed, and the Dominion began to stabilize. Calith worked closely with her father to integrate new strategies and lessons learned from the human approach to problem-solving. Fleets were retrained to anticipate the unpredictable, to adapt, and to survive. Intelligence networks were restructured to monitor anomalies, not just follow protocol. Humans and Aurelians began training together. Initially, some officers doubted the value of working with humans. Their bodies were smaller, less durable, and their tactics unconventional. But over time, the results spoke for themselves. Humans noticed small details, anticipated outcomes, and adapted in ways Aurelians had never considered. Calith watched these sessions with pride. This is only the beginning, she said to Elias. If the Dominion can embrace this, we will be stronger than ever. Elias replied quietly, strength is not always what you see. Sometimes it is what you endure, what you notice, and how you respond. That is something everyone can learn. Meanwhile, whispers of change reached the outer sectors of the galaxy. Word of a princess returning with a human companion spread to neighboring civilizations. Some were skeptical, some intrigued. Humans were still considered primitive by many empires, yet now their reputation was shifting. A species once underestimated was now associated with survival, strategy, and ingenuity. Calith recognized the opportunity. She sent emissaries to nearby systems, not to conquer or demand allegiance, but to form alliances based on respect and shared goals. Humans played a central role in these negotiations, demonstrating the practicality, honesty, and adaptability of their species. Elias observed quietly, contributing when needed, showing through action the value of resilience and careful planning. Where diplomacy failed through arrogance or intimidation, humans succeeded with clarity and adaptability. Slowly, the galaxy began to take notice. Humans were more than survivors, they were innovators. In the Celestial Palace, King Vaylor addressed his people for the first time since Calith's return. Citizens gathered in the plaza below, anxious yet hopeful. He raised his voice, calm but filled with authority. "My people," he began, "we have faced trials that could have destroyed us, and yet we endure. Our princess has returned stronger than ever. She brings with her a companion, an ally who has shown us the power of endurance, adaptability, and courage." The crowd murmured. Humans were unfamiliar to many, but they listened with growing respect. Valor continued, "The galaxy is changing. New threats, new species, and new ideas will shape our future. But we will not face them alone. Together, with wisdom, with courage, and with trust in one another, we will endure, we will thrive, and we will write a new destiny for the Aurelian Dominion." The citizens erupted in cheers. Calith stood beside her father, her hand resting on Elia's shoulder. Together, they represented a future full of possibility, where endurance, ingenuity, and courage mattered more than heritage alone. That evening, Calith and Elias returned to the balcony. The stars stretched endlessly before them, shining with the promise of new beginnings. "Do you think they truly understand?" Calith asked. Elias looked out at the stars. "They will. Time teaches more than words ever can. And humans, we endure, we adapt, and we survive. That is a lesson the galaxy will not forget." Calith smiled, placing her hand on his. "Then let us continue together, not just for the Dominion, but for the galaxy itself. There is much work to be done." He nodded. "Together." Above them, the stars shimmered with possibilities. Threats would come. Challenges would rise. The unknown waited beyond every horizon. But Calith, Elias, and the people of the Aurelian Dominion were ready. They had survived the impossible, adapted to the unpredictable, and proven that true strength lay not only in power, but in resilience, courage, and intelligence. And so a new era began, a bond forged among stars, where humans and Aurelians stood together, facing the galaxy not with fear, but with determination, hope, and the unyielding will to endure. For the first time in many cycles, King Valor smiled without worry. His daughter had returned. Humanity had proven its worth, and the future of the Dominion was brighter than any star.